3 months ago, I accidentally opened her laptop. At least, that's what I told myself when I clicked into her Messenger tab, telling myself I was checking a calendar invite, maybe looking for that list of tasks she'd said she'd written down. I saw Mark's name first, then her picture next to his, their grinning faces from some brewery patio I'd never seen. I was halfway through the thread before I realized I wasn't blinking. Mark wasn't a stranger. He'd been at our dinner table. He was the one who helped carry our new couch into the house last fall while I paid for pizza. The same guy who once called me a solid dude before asking for a second beer. The messages weren't subtle. There were emojis, innuendos, and screenshots of things I had texted her, with her mockingly breaking them down for his amusement. That night, I didn't even wait for her to come home. I forwarded the chat to my email, made copies of our financial records, and drafted a message to a lawyer. When she walked in, laughing into her phone, I was sitting at the table with a printed stack of paper, my wedding ring lying on top. I filed the divorce petition that same week. Since then, everything had moved in slow, calculated steps. The judge issued temporary rulings, including separate residences, freezing joint accounts, and a calendar for dividing property. Most of my things were already boxed up and moved. What remained were items stored in the garage, my woodworking tools, some clothes left in a closet, and a few heirlooms tucked away in drawers I hadn't emptied. By legal order, I was permitted one final access date to collect those remaining possessions. One entry, 2 hours. I was meticulous about following the court's guidelines. I drafted a written list of everything I would take, photographed the boxes and empty bins I planned to bring, and sent all of it to her attorney by certified mail. That same envelope included the court-stamped schedule authorizing my visit. No one could say they didn't know I was coming. When the day arrived, I left nothing to chance. I wore a plain t-shirt, kept my phone charged and recording ready, and brought along my witness, my old friend Simon, who had served in the military and now worked private security. The judge hadn't said I had to bring someone, but after watching how easily people twist reality when emotions are involved, I wasn't walking into a trap unarmed. We pulled into the driveway 5 minutes early. Simon stayed in the car. I walked up slowly, checking the front camera. Months ago, after tools had started disappearing from the shed, I installed a new surveillance system. It wasn't meant for this, but now I was glad it was there. The device blinked silently above the front door, its lens fixed on the porch. She hadn't replied to any of the pre-arrival notices. But that didn't matter. I had my copy of the court order, the time-stamped letter, and the right to be here. I took a breath and turned the key, one last time. The door creaked open with the weight of familiarity, and just like that, I stepped into the house I'd helped build with my bare hands. Hardwood I laid myself. I painted the trim over 3 winter weekends. Every detail seemed like a relic now, something abandoned by the version of me who still believed we were building a life. Voices filtered in from the kitchen. I heard laughter, hers and a man's, that voice I recognized. Mark. They weren't whispering. In fact, they sounded like they were celebrating something. I rounded the corner and saw them standing by the counter, a bottle of red uncorked, glasses half full. Her legs were crossed over one of the stools, a smile frozen on her lips the moment she saw me. "Did you think we'd clean up before His Majesty came over?" she said, raising her glass like a toast. My eyes didn't move to Mark. I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, then pulled the folded paper from my back pocket and held it up. "I'm collecting my listed items. Everything else will go through attorneys," I said. My voice was steady, unbothered. She pushed off the stool and closed the distance between us with theatrical flair, her glass clinking as she set it down harder than necessary. There was that smirk again, the one she used when she wanted to make something hurt just right. "I still can't believe you're actually doing this," she said. "All this drama, over what? A couple of texts?" Then she raised her hand and slapped my cheek, hard. A clean, open-handed hit that stung and rang in my ear. The kitchen light above us flickered for a second, or maybe that was just my vision. "You're pathetic," she said, her voice flat. Mark chuckled behind her like she'd just delivered the punchline of a joke they'd been rehearsing. I stood utterly still. "Don't touch me again," I said calmly. Mark's chair scraped the floor as he stood up. He walked over, puffing himself up like he was back in college, trying to win a bar fight. He was taller than I by maybe an inch, built like he spent weekends lifting for Instagram clout. He looked down at my chest and snorted. "He's not even a man. Look at him." He moved closer. I stayed still. And with that, the trap they thought they'd baited quietly snapped shut. Only they weren't the ones holding the handle. Mark didn't blink. His chest was pressed against mine now, like he was daring me to blink first. I could smell the wine on his breath, something expensive, spicy, probably meant to impress her. Or maybe it wasn't about her at all. Perhaps this moment was his idea of conquest, of victory, of proving himself inside my house with his hand already wrapped around what used to be mine. "You're in my space," I said, eyes locked on his. He smirked. "She's mine now. Maybe get used to that." His shoulder nudged mine deliberately, a childish test. Still, I didn't raise my voice. But my right foot adjusted slightly, a shift only someone trained to look for it would have noticed. I wasn't angry. That had drained out of me 3 months ago, somewhere between finding their vacation photos from a beach I was told was for a conference and reading his pet names for her. I had no anger left. What I had now was timing. "I'm giving you one chance to step back," I said, calm, slow, with a rhythm you'd use if you were reciting measurements before cutting wood. He laughed. "Look at him trying to act tough," he said over his shoulder to her, not breaking eye contact. "You hear this?" She was silent. Either she had realized the shift in the air, or she was savoring it, waiting for the final twist. Mark leaned in just enough that his shoulder pushed into mine a second time, more forceful this round, a clear challenge. That was it. The movement was quick and controlled. I stepped slightly left, redirected his weight as he leaned in, and with one short, tight motion, drove my fist into the bridge of his nose. The impact made a sound I won't forget, part crunch, part gasp. His body crumpled back into the chair behind him, hand instinctively flying to his face. Blood gushed between his fingers, pouring down onto the front of his shirt and pooling in his lap. He screamed, a high, unguarded wail more suited to a child than the puffed-up figure he'd tried to be a moment ago. She bolted to his side, yelling my name like I'd suddenly become unhinged, like the provocations never happened, like the slap hadn't just left a mark on my cheekbone. I said nothing. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the call log, and tapped the emergency number already prepared in my favorites. 911. What's your emergency? There's been an incident at my residence, I said clearly. One individual has been injured. I'm the one who made the call. I'm standing still, and the scene is secure. I walked calmly to the kitchen island and set the phone down, camera facing up. I took 2 steps back, raised my hands shoulder high, and stared straight into the lens above the front door. The surveillance system was still rolling, the red indicator light blinking steadily. The slap, the shoulder shove, every provocation, all captured. Her screaming didn't slow. Mark's hands were still cupped over his nose, voice rising in pain and incoherent curses. Blood ran between his fingers like water from a broken faucet. I kept my stance and waited. It didn't take long. The first police cruiser pulled up less than 5 minutes after the call. Another followed seconds later. I waved one hand slightly through the open window to let them know where I stood, still within sight of the door camera. 2 officers stepped inside, cautious but not panicked. One scanned the room, noting Mark in the chair, the bloody floor, her frantic voice, and me, stationary, hands visible, calm. I nodded toward the camera above the entryway. There's audio and video, I said. It recorded everything. They asked for identification. I handed over my wallet and the certified court order for the property retrieval. The officer flipped through it, nodding as he read. He took my license, checked the timestamps, then looked over at her. You were aware of the time he was scheduled to arrive? She opened her mouth, hesitated, and then looked at the floor. We didn't expect him actually to use it, she muttered. The officer turned to me. You say he stepped into your personal space? Yes, twice, after I told him to back off. Mark groaned from the chair, leaning forward now with a tissue stuffed against his face. He attacked me. He barked through the blood. Actually, I responded to him by shoving me. After she hit me, all of which is on video. I tilted my head toward the blinking red light again. One of the officers asked to view the footage. I handed him my phone, which was already paired with the camera's app. He tapped through the feed while his partner spoke to the dispatcher, relaying details and requesting an ambulance. The video played clearly. Her slap, Mark's approach, my warning, the shove, the hit, one sequence at a time, framed with clarity and no need for commentary. The officer looked up after watching it once, then again, slower. "I'll need to copy this for the report," he said. "You'll be giving a statement?" I nodded. They asked her to step outside while they tended to Mark. An EMT crew arrived within moments, lifting him onto a gurney as he continued swearing, insisting I ambushed him, that I had been planning this. I said nothing. Silence always speaks louder when chaos is the only other voice in the room. At the police station, I gave my account. Short, measured, factual. I showed them the fading redness on my face. A doctor made note of the bruising. I asked for a copy of the medical report and the signed complaint form. They printed both. By then, my attorney was already drafting a motion requesting a temporary protection order against both of them. Not out of fear, but to secure what was left of the court's trust in me and its doubt in them. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the end of anything. It was only the first piece of the case I was quietly building, one deliberate step at a time. I didn't go back to the house the next day. There was nothing left for me there, and certainly nothing emotional. I let my attorney handle the communication. He submitted the emergency request for a protection order before noon, attaching the surveillance footage, medical documentation, and a transcript of the 911 call. While the court processed the motion, I reviewed the video frame by frame myself. Each second sharpened what I already knew. They hadn't expected resistance. They thought I'd either walk away humiliated or lash out recklessly. Either outcome would have served their plan. But instead, they stood in front of a camera and triggered the exact series of events I'd prepared for. Mark's face was plastered across the evening news later that week. Not by name, but the image of him walking into the ER with gauze over his face made the rounds after someone leaked it to a local gossip blog. His account painted him as the victim of a jealous husband's blind rage. There were even hints that I had entered unannounced, looking to start trouble. It would have worked, too, if not for the time-stamped court order, the certified letter, the witness in the car, and most of all, the camera above the door. When the detective called me back, his tone had changed. What started as a routine report had evolved into something more. He wasn't just logging an altercation anymore. He wanted to understand why they were there in the first place, drinking wine in the kitchen when they had been fully briefed on my court-authorized visit. "She knew you'd be there," he said over the phone. She signed the letter, confirmed with her attorney. Why have a guest over during a scheduled pickup, especially someone she knows is part of the conflict? I listened without speaking. The detective continued. "We're looking into it. I've asked for their phone records. Consent-based, for now. If they decline, we'll escalate." I hung up, leaning back in my chair. The wheels were turning, slowly, but in the right direction. That's when the real break came. 2 days later, my lawyer called. "They've obtained partial contents of her phone," he said. The detective flagged something. Personal. He read aloud a message she'd sent to a friend, dated 4 days before the incident. I could hear the disdain in his voice as he spoke. If he breaks down, I win everything. 1 sentence, 9 words. But it confirmed everything I suspected, and more. This wasn't a coincidence. It was calculated, premeditated. They created a scenario designed to provoke a reaction, then capture the fallout for use in court as leverage. Her friend responded with laughing emojis and a message that read, "Don't forget to act scared afterward." This was beyond manipulation. It bordered on criminal interference in a legal process. The detective called again later that afternoon. His questions were precise now. Focused. "Did she make any comments about your emotional state before the visit? Suggest that you had a temper?" "She called me unstable in her preliminary statement to the court," I replied. "Claimed she was afraid I might retaliate. And yet she invited him over. Set the table. Left the door unlocked." He didn't say it directly, but I understood. They were gathering evidence of intent. A possible obstruction charge, or worse, attempted entrapment in a legal proceeding. By evening, the protection order had been granted. Both were barred from contacting me or entering the property without written approval from the court. Their shared narrative was unraveling. That weekend, I visited Simon, the man who'd sat quietly in my car as it all unfolded. We watched the footage again in his office, this time with another friend, a retired forensic investigator. She pointed out several details I hadn't noticed. The placement of the wine glasses. Her phone was already recording audio on the kitchen counter. The angle Mark stood at before stepping forward. "This was theater," she said flatly. "Staged down to the minute." She offered to write a private analysis I could submit to the court if needed. I thanked her, though I suspected the digital trail would be more than enough. Her messages, the video, and the sequence of behavior painted a picture the judge wouldn't ignore. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed an addendum to our divorce proceedings, citing malicious intent to influence a court decision. He included screenshots of the texts, sworn statements, and a certified copy of the video footage. He even flagged the audio of Mark laughing after the slap, labeling it evidence of coordinated provocation. The detective followed up 2 days later. He had interviewed the friend who received the message. She admitted the entire thing had been a joke gone wrong. Her voice cracked in the transcript when asked whether she understood the legal implications of conspiring to elicit a violent response during a property exchange. As the file thickened with every new submission, her side went quiet. The smug confidence that once filled their kitchen had vanished. For the first time since this began, I felt something that resembled relief. Because the mask had fallen off. They could try to rewrite the story in whispers and private messages. They could tell their version over wine and jokes. But the footage didn't laugh. The documents didn't flinch. The court wouldn't forget. Each piece fit together, and the pattern they thought would trap me had turned back onto them. Next came the hearing. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. By the time I walked into the courtroom, my lawyer had already prepared 3 binders, each one marked with colored tabs: evidence, witness statements, digital records. He handed me one with a quiet nod. I didn't need to open it. I'd memorized the contents over the past 2 weeks. She arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by her attorney. Mark followed, his nose still swollen beneath a pair of tinted glasses, with a thin bandage stretched across the bridge of his nose. His swagger had faded. He moved with the stiffness of someone unsure whether to sit tall or keep his head down. Her expression had changed, too. Less triumphant, more rehearsed. The bailiff called the session to order. The judge, a silver-haired woman with an expression like tempered steel, looked down at the stack of motions and exhibits before her. She glanced first at the request for sanctions, then at the video transcript beside it. "I've reviewed the footage submitted last week," she said calmly, folding her hands. "I've also reviewed the message logs and emergency call records. Mr. Dale, would you like to begin?" My attorney stood and cleared his throat once, then started methodically. "Your Honor, we're not merely addressing a property retrieval gone wrong. This case now involves deliberate efforts to stage a confrontation to influence the final divorce proceedings. Our client followed every stipulation in the temporary court order. He notified opposing counsel in advance. He arrived on time. The only aggression displayed occurred after 2 physical provocations, both captured on high-definition video, time-stamped and corroborated. He passed the judge a highlighted transcript of the messages pulled from her phone, including the one that had changed everything. If he breaks down, I win everything. The courtroom held its breath. Even the clerk paused mid-keystroke. Her lawyer stood and objected to the character framing, insisting the messages were private, taken out of context, exaggerated banter between friends. "Then let's read the rest," the judge replied, picking up a second sheet. The friend's response, "Don't forget to act scared afterward," doesn't sound like casual humor. Her attorney flinched slightly, then attempted to pivot. My client was under emotional stress at the time. The judge raised one finger and cut him off. "Which explains the slap?" He hesitated. She reacted instinctively. She reacted after inviting the man's new partner into a shared space during a court-mandated window, knowing full well he would be arriving. The judge replied, "There's nothing instinctive about setting wine glasses out and preparing the audio recorder on the kitchen counter. That's orchestration." Mark shifted in his seat, visibly sweating. His lawyer remained silent. He hadn't submitted a counterclaim. At this point, any attempt would likely have backfired. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Dale, is your client requesting additional relief?" My attorney nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We're requesting a modification of the visitation structure for property exchanges, a formal restriction against both individuals from being present during any remaining transactions, and financial sanctions for time and resources consumed defending against a manufactured narrative." The judge didn't hesitate. "Granted, a court-appointed supervisor will oversee all future access. Both respondents are to remain at least 100 feet from the premises during designated intervals. Any violations will result in contempt charges. Regarding the sanctions, I will issue a fine equivalent to court processing and filing fees incurred. He nodded. I said nothing. She stood, whispering frantically into her attorney's ear. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is there something you'd like to add, Miss Carver? Her lips parted, but no words came out. For once, she had run out of spins. The judge continued. Let the record reflect that this court has reviewed all available footage, verified the sequence of events, and finds that the petitioner acted within the scope of legal self-defense. Any further claims of emotional aggression by the petitioner will require new, independently verified evidence. The gavel tapped once. Court is adjourned. My lawyer packed the binders. Across the aisle, she fumbled with her phone, scrolling through something furiously, likely searching for a loophole, a strategy, a second chance at the narrative she had tried to engineer. Outside, the sunlight felt sharper, cleaner. I stood on the steps with my copy of the order in hand. The new clause was bolded, protection granted, visitation restructured, sanctions issued. Simon met me at the curb, leaning against the side of his truck. He didn't say much. I passed him the folder, and he skimmed through the first page. They cornered the wrong guy, he muttered, folding it closed. I thought about her expression as the footage played. The way her voice faltered when her plan collapsed under its weight. How quickly Mark shifted from puffed-up antagonist to a liability. They came in confident, sure that the truth was malleable, that perception would carry more power than preparation. But perception folds fast under clarity. They hadn't planned for surveillance. They hadn't expected legal discipline. They were counting on chaos, and when it didn't come, they drowned in silence. I slid into the passenger seat beside Simon, watching the courthouse fade behind us. There was still more ahead: final division, custody considerations, asset distribution. But that day wasn't about settling finances. It was about setting fire to their version of the story and letting the smoke rise in full view of the court. 3 weeks later, the final hearing arrived. It wasn't about fists or slaps this time. It was the ledger phase. Real assets, financial settlements, retirement splits. The kind of dry courtroom calculus that bored even the judge. But for me, it was the final note in a piece I'd played perfectly, measure by measure. We filed early, as usual. My attorney came armed with spreadsheets, tax documents, and valuation reports. He moved like a surgeon, clean, methodical. Across the aisle, her legal team appeared less confident. Their argument had been gutted at the last session. Their narrative had been exposed. Now they looked like they were waiting for a storm to pass, hoping to salvage whatever remained. She arrived alone this time. No Mark. His name hadn't been mentioned in weeks. After the incident, his counsel had quietly pulled back, filing a separate claim to sever any financial entanglements. My lawyer said it was likely a move to protect himself from being dragged deeper. Probably advised to minimize appearances, disappear from proceedings altogether. Fine by me. The judge entered and asked for updates on outstanding issues. Property division came first. We had submitted a full accounting of shared belongings, all backed by receipts and valuations. I'd waived sentimental items. She had tried to attach inflated emotional value to common goods: a desk I'd bought at an outlet, a chair from her uncle that hadn't been used in years. The judge wasn't moved. Then came the retirement accounts. She wanted a 50% stake in my pension. We submitted transcripts of her correspondence with Mark, their messages mocking the stability I provided, calling my work a safety net to climb out of. That phrase was highlighted. The judge flipped through the exhibit and looked at her. You characterized his earnings as disposable in your own words, she said quietly. You called his contributions laughable. Now you want to benefit from them? Her attorney attempted a redirection, some tired line about long-term marriage and mutual investment. But the judge shook her head. Actions speak louder. She adjusted the percentage. 25. That was it. Next came the spousal maintenance request. Her side argued for support. She claimed she'd sacrificed her career prospects for the sake of the marriage. But we'd provided her resume, her recent job application, and the letter from her current employer. She'd been working under the table for over a year, freelance marketing under a friend's company name. The paper trail exposed it. My lawyer slid a packet forward. This is her work invoice history, submitted through her shared PayPal business account. The judge stared for a moment, then glanced at her. You failed to disclose secondary income. That affects eligibility. Request denied. The courtroom grew colder. Her face, once animated with indignation, had dulled to something more challenging to read. Maybe calculation, maybe regret. But she never turned toward me. She hadn't since the day Mark left bleeding in that chair. The judge finished the final section. Personal conduct. This court finds that the petitioner maintained legal and procedural integrity throughout these proceedings, she read aloud. The respondent displayed behavior considered disruptive to an equitable process. Future violations or attempts to manipulate documentation will be met with immediate sanctions. A final stamp echoed through the room. And with that, the gavel came down. I walked out with the order in hand, 4 pages long, ending with my name under a line marked Full Division Resolved. Orders final. Outside, the sky was overcast, but the air was clean and fresh. Crisp. Simon texted me one word. Done. I sat in the car and stared at the document. Not out of disbelief, but because it felt exactly as it should. There had been a moment, back when I first found the messages, when I thought rage was the only path, when my hands itched for something irrational. When I'd paced the kitchen with visions of confrontation, but that urge had passed, cooled by logic and patience. They came for drama. I gave them a strategy. They expected a breakdown. I offered clarity. Every move they made was designed to drag me down, force an explosion, and bait the court into seeing me through their distorted lens. Instead, they delivered their undoing, recorded, time-stamped, sealed in evidence. A few weeks later, I received an envelope at my office. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was hers. Inside was a folded note. I never thought you'd hit him. I thought you'd hit me. I thought you'd snap. I told myself that would prove I was right about everything. But you just stood there. And now I can't stop thinking about that. I didn't frame it. I shredded it and moved on. There's no power in replays. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it walks in quietly, signs a document, and walks back out, while the people who thought they'd win through noise are left standing in silence. She screamed when Mark went down. She howled when the police took statements. She raised her voice in court when the ruling went against her. But when the last door closed, there was only quiet. And I've never heard anything sweeter.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.